Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. And before we start, let's have a look at this quote by Naval Ravikant.
The fastest way to help somebody get a job right now, if you know somebody in the market who's looking for a job, the best thing you can do is say, hey, go download the AI tools and start talking to them, to start using them in any way. And then you can walk into any employer in almost any field and say, hey, I understand AI, and they'll hire you on the exact.
So as you see, AI is the future, and if you don't learn it, you're going to fall behind. Now, the fastest way to learn and integrate AI into what you know already is via APIs. API means Application Programming Interface. It sounds complicated, but really it's not. And in this video, I'm going to teach you everything. The reason I'm doing is because I'm getting a lot of emails from beginners who have little to no code experience and they want to jump into the world of AI, and not only just to chat with ChatGPT, but to actually make something substantial and level up in their careers. So I'm going to also make a series about how absolute beginners and people with no coding experiences can also learn and integrate AI into their existing workflows and even level up their skills so that they can get a better job or better pay or just make something that is fun using AI, which is going to be the future. So this is the whole document that I have prepared for you to make you understand in the most simplest way possible what is API, how to use it, and very importantly, why is this the most crucial piece of the puzzle if you want to develop anything using AI. I will also give you a direct link to download this document in a PDF format so that if you want to use it for any of your presentations or anything at all, you can do that. All right, so let's start with the basic question, what is an API? And I'm going to explain it to you in the most visual format and in a real life situation that you can relate to, right? So to understand what is an API, let's imagine you are at a restaurant, right? So when you are at a restaurant, you don't go into the kitchen and start cooking, right? You look at a menu, and the menu lists the dishes that restaurants can make and what you need to know about them, like the ingredients and the prices. After you have a look at the menu, you tell the waiter, who is a link in between you and the kitchen, what you want, and in turn they relay your order to the kitchen. And the last step being, the order is brought to your table and you enjoy your meal. So that is an analogy, and if we do the same analogy in the terms of how API works, we should understand this, that you are the user or the application. Right? So you make a request. So you can see in this diagram that user makes a request, and that's always true regardless of which kind of API you are using. A user or an application always makes a request. And the next question that pops in your mind is, you made a request, but you made a request to whom? And in this situation, the menu is the API because you are requesting or getting information from that menu. You're not getting the information from the kitchen or the chef or the waiter at all. You are getting the information you need from the menu. And that information is predefined for you, right? So the restaurant has listed everything that you need to know, and you can choose from only that. And next up, the waiter is the intermediary handling your request and delivering the result. So the waiter is the one that is processing your request. Right? The kitchen is the server or application providing the service. So kitchen, like physically, it is always at the back. So you can imagine this as the back end of the whole process. So that is where all the operations of the API, or in this case, your food that is being prepared, everything is being done in the back end, which is called the kitchen. And lastly, the food or the data or the service is being delivered back to the user, which was you, and in this case it can be an application as well. So this is a whole circle of how the API interaction cycle happens, and this will not change regardless of what API and what method you're using. You can have different methods added in between when you do a lot more complex stuff, but since we are focusing right now on the basic understanding of the fundamentals, if you understand this, you'll be easily able to grasp much more complex scenarios in future. So I hope this is clear that what is API at a very basic level, right? So essentially an API is a set of rules that allow different software applications to communicate with each other, right? So in this case, we communicated what we needed to somebody, and then that somebody communicated what we needed further, and then the process happened, and then the ultimate result was delivered to us. That's the whole cycle, right? Another real life example could be checking the weather. So all of us have the weather applications on our phone. You can have an iPhone, you can have an Android, doesn't matter. It usually will have a weather app. Now understand these points. Your weather app doesn't have its own weather station, right? So Apple or Google is not going around and setting up weather stations just to get the data of when it will rain or not and relay it to you. They are not doing that. Instead, they are using APIs provided by the weather services like AccuWeather or OpenWeatherMap. These are two examples. There can be many other. So whenever you open your weather app, the app sends a request through the API asking for the weather data for your location. And when the backend services of the weather station receive that request, they relay that information to you, and that's how you see the data of your location. Now, important part is, since you requested the data for your location, they are only sending that particular data for you. Unless you request data for any other location, the only relay that will come back to you would be of one specific location, right? So you can understand from this diagram as well. The first step is the app requests the weather data. Second step is the API forwards a request to the backend service or the weather service processors, and then they send that particular data back, and then that data is displayed inside your app, and that's how you see the weather. Just getting simple information on your screen can be so complicated behind the scenes, but if you understand the concepts, it will not look or sound that complicated at all, right? So now let's dig deeper into our API tutorial. So when we focus and zoom in only on the API part of the whole process, like this one. So when I zoom in into this part, this is composed of two things. One is the request and one is the response. If you remember that there were two times where the server had an interaction with you on the restaurant table. One was when he took the order and the other was when he delivered the order, right? So when he took the order, that was the request section of the API. And when you got the order, the same server brought your order to your table, and that was the response. So all the APIs in the world will have these two bodies as both ends of their working. One end will be request and the other end would be response, right? Now, the format in which the request and response work in tech language or in AI or in any other field is known as JSON. JSON is a particular language that all API, or I would say most API standards follow, and the full form of JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. Now, for those of you who know programming, you can immediately figure out what this is about. But those of you who do not, don't worry about it, because there are tools that I'll tell you later how to make sense of this. And in fact, you don't even have to make sense of it if you understand the logic. So just for reference, this is how a JSON, we call it payload, but to make it a little more simpler, just understand this is how a JSON request looks like. And if you can just logically detect what this is saying that this is an OpenAI JSON call, and you can figure out that it is saying that the model is GPT-4o and the messages is user and hello, how are you, right? So this is a format of JSON that we'll learn as we move forward, but just understand this thing that whatever communication is going to happen inside any APIs or most APIs, that is going to happen in JSON format, right? Now, why are APIs important? Why are we even investing our time and energy to understand this? Three important points. First of all, they allow different applications to work together. You can, by the use of API, you can integrate any AI in any app of your preference or your business or just about anything, you don't have to develop everything from scratch. For example, Apple or Google don't have to develop weather stations of their own because they can take the data from the weather stations via their APIs and they can deliver that to you as a user. So all the problems are solved just by having a layer of API between the user and the application, right? Again, they save time and effort. Imagine how much time and effort it would take for companies to set up physical weather stations just to get the data that somebody who already has set up for themselves can give them via API, right? Third step would be they enable innovation. Imagine you have an app that can use APIs from multiple sources which are doing multiple things at once, right? So instead of focusing your time and energy in inventing the wheel again and again, you can just take what's already there, what's already developed by other people, and integrate in your app using API, right? So API is extremely important to understand, and it's extremely crucial in development of great new softwares, and it really enables innovation, right? So how do we use APIs in our usual life, right? So the most simple examples that I can think of are these three. First of all is social media login. I'm sure all of you must have logged in on websites using login via Google button, right? Instead of using a username and password, which most users tend to forget over time, what that button does is it enables you to not have a username and password. And that's a huge advantage for users because they don't need to remember any passwords anymore. And also the application in the background would not know their credentials because they are logging in via API of Google, which is not going to give them your username and password of Google, but it's in turn is going to link your account via API. You know, another thing is maps in apps. I'm sure you'd be using delivery services every single day in your life, and when you see that map popping in when it says where is your order or where is your driver, that map is not developed by that particular applications, right? They are taking the data from Google Maps because Google Maps have invested decades of learning and innovation and research in making their mapping services. So instead of reinventing the wheel, they are taking that data from Google using their API and displaying to you by putting a layer of their own systems, which is your order tracking on that map for you, right? Third thing would be online payments. So when you pay something online, the underlying app will not get your financial details. Like they can't see your credit card information or any of that because that information will go through a payment gateway, and the payment gateway in turn will give them authentication like the payment has been succeeded or failed or whatever XYZ. And that is how APIs enable secure and fast and user-friendly integration between what you see and what's happening behind the scenes. I hope this is clear by these examples, right? Now, once you're clear that the APIs are going to be request and response, these are the two major types of APIs that you need to learn right now, right? Now, if we zoom even further using a technical lens, there are only two types of APIs that you need to understand. One is GET and one is POST. That's it. There are several others, but for your use case, for learning purposes and to start and actually build something substantial right now, you can just do that using GET and POST. So I think it's self-explanatory, like what is GET and POST. GET is something when you're looking at the menu to see what dishes are available. You are simply retrieving the information, right? So for example, checking the weather app for today's forecast, you are getting the current weather data. You're not sending anything, right? When we come to POST, that is an example of you're placing an order. You're sending information to the kitchen to create something new which doesn't exist before you place that order, right? Again, placing an order through a delivery app, you're sending your order details to the restaurant, and that's a POST. So in POST, you push the information, and in GET, you retrieve the information like that. And like here in API terms, GET is used to retrieve the data from server, right? Think of it as asking, give me the information about something XYZ. And post is used to send the data to the server to create, update, delete something. So all these create, update, delete are separate terms that we use in API programming. But for now, you can put all of these inside post. Now, the basic difference between get and post are three. One is data visibility. Get data is visible in the URL, while post data is hidden. So imagine you're filling a form on a website, right? So when you get the information about the form, what the form is, that get information can be visible in the URL. But whatever you post, whatever you fill in that form and then hit the submit, that information is hidden from the URL. If it was not hidden, it would have been a major security breach, right? Security. Post is generally more secure for sensitive information only because it's not visible in headers or URLs or any of those visible fields to the user, right? Data size. Get has limitation on data size due to URL length restrictions, while post can handle larger amount of data because we are pushing that data to the server back. Now, this was all about APIs. So I hope you understood what an API essentially is. And by these real life examples, you are able to visualize how APIs work. And you now know that what request and response is. You now know that JSON is the language that is spoken by the API bots. And you also know that how you're using these APIs right now in your actual real life. And you have to understand the get and the post are the two types of APIs that is needed right now for you to create something. Now that was it for the introduction of API. I think it is essential for you to understand this. The next step for this would be how to actually use the get and post API formats, how to understand what an API of a particular company or software is, and how to actually use something to make something substantial like an app or an automation. All of this is what I'm going to teach you in this video, which you can see right now on your screen.